Hey everybody, welcome back again for another exciting edition of MedHeads. This is MedCity News' version of MTV's Unplugged or Fun with Flags or whatever you want to say about a laid-back, fun, and insightful podcast. We talk about the business of innovation in healthcare. I am your host, Chris Seper, and I am joined by two members of the MedCity team as we talk about the Super Bowl of Health IT, which comes up this weekend and on into next week, HIMSS. It is easily the biggest gathering of digital health and health IT. It's the place where big announcements are typically made and a lot of CIO budgets are set. And so to join me this week, and it's also, as I like to call it, #City. And so joining me this week from beautiful city of Philadelphia, she is the digital health editor at MedCity News. Her name is Stephanie Baum. Stephanie, how are you? Are you excited about HIMSS?
I am. The excitement is building.
It's boiling over. I can tell. And also in Chicago, who has been covering over 10 HIMSS, Neil?
15. This is
15. I wouldn't have never admit that. He is in Chicago. He covers health IT for MedCity, and he's the dean of HIMSS. All apologies to his talk. Neil Versel.
Thank you, and all apologies to John Morrissey, who's been there for 25 years.
That's another thing I would never admit. But anyway, so HIMSS is the Super Bowl of health IT, right? It is really one of the few places when you talk about health IT that you get everything from the enterprise software, hard back end, to healthcare social media, to even now you have emerging digital health startups as formal presentations. The whole ecosystem of health IT in one place, it is massive. And last year there were some pretty amazing announcements. Our friends at IBM really announced their first Watson salvo with Watson Health, the beginnings of what was a pretty aggressive conversation by patients around their rights and access to information and their role in sculpting the information they have, really launched at HIMSS last year, and a whole bunch of other things that happened. So we're really talking to two HIMSS veterans, two tech veterans today, to get their take on what we should be expecting at HIMSS and maybe even a few predictions. So Neil, you've got seniority. Let's talk with you. Give me your take. What is going to be different about 2016 HIMSS? What should people who are looking from afar or coming there to get things done be paying attention to?
Well, I was a little surprised in talking to HIMSS Executive Vice President Carla Smith. You can check medcitynews.com for the podcast I recorded with her.
Beautiful plug.
Yes, we got she gave me a little bit of a preview of the CIO survey that they announce every year, which they will be releasing on Tuesday. I couldn't get all the data. Journalism hero, there you go. I'm thinking that, I had been going in thinking that everybody's going to be talking about security and about what's next for meaningful use. Well, as it turns out, the CIOs seem to have mostly on their mind how to adapt to the value-based purchasing world that we're entering. So I was very surprised. I thought that, between the announcement that CMS is looking for something better than meaningful use, and also all the breaches, and just in the last 2 weeks, the ransom attack on Hollywood Presbyterian Hospital, that those issues would take center stage. But it sounds like, and I'm sure they will at some point. I mean, we're talking a massive conference. Carla also said that there's a good chance they're going to approach 50,000 attendees. Last year's record of 45,000 beat the previous record by more than 20%. It keeps getting bigger and it's this big thing that just seems untamable anymore, which is why, speaking of hashtags, this one is one of my favorites. Insanity.
That's great.
Which I've been suffering from for at least the last 2 weeks.
Well, Stephanie, that's interesting. I mean, that's a really good point about expectations, because I think I'm with you, right? I thought that cybersecurity would be one of the big discourses in HIMSS, but you're hearing something else front and center from your sources. Stephanie, what about you? I mean, you will both be at HIMSS. We should say this. So if any PR people have not yet emailed Stephanie and Neil, they should do so.
Yes.
But
because I'm really polite to people who get me at the last minute and assume that I have lots of time available.
But it's newsworthy. But Stephanie, anyway, what are you hearing? As you prep, what's your agenda going to be, and what do you expect to hear a lot of as you get to HIMSS?
Sure. Well, I've been to I think two HIMSS prior to this, so I don't have as deep a track record at these events as Neil does. But
Rookie.
Basically, I think it's interesting. I guess I would be I think there's going to be plenty of cybersecurity issues that are coming to the fore because if we're talking about data and companies collecting data and storing it on the cloud and storing it in electronic health records, how are hospitals going to protect that? And that's such an ongoing issue. I think, but as Neil said, there is going to be plenty of discussion about that, but there's also going to be plenty of conversation about a huge number of companies are trying to compete with each other with population health applications. And I feel like if I were I feel like I'm raking leaves of press releases, the number of things that I've seen from companies that I can't name, obviously, that said we're going to be launching a population health application at this conference. And it's interesting to me because even just yesterday.
How many of those apps are going to be revolutionary?
Well, exactly. I mean, probably there are some companies that have more experience with this than others. Maybe companies that want to focus on a narrow problem in population health will have more success than those that try to sort of take on all of the chronic conditions that are an issue.
Well, let me ask this, Stephanie, when they talk about the population health apps, so we're going to see a lot of rollout of pop health apps. I mean, are these pop health apps that are supposed to be used by doctors for their populations? Are these kind of family caregiver population health apps? What are these pop health apps trying to fit as far as an unmet need?
I think for the most part, it's basically trying to lay the infrastructure that will make it possible to shift for hospitals and practices to shift from fee-for-service to outcomes-based care.
Can you give an example of one of the apps?
Not without violating an embargo.
I can.
Ballpark me one, Neil.
Okay, well, I'm going to tell you, I can't give you details, but I can tell you that Salesforce Health Cloud, which was officially announced right at the beginning of September, is going to give us some more news.
Interesting.
That's the big one. That's kind of the big one.
Last year, something that I observed, and I know that Shahid, Shaw, and others that were there, we talked about this I was at HIMSS last year, is you had gigantic vendors asking health systems to bring gigantic solutions into their health system, right? I mean, enterprise-wide things, it just didn't seem to make sense, that in an era where that's just a huge risk and a huge change for a health system. If I'm hearing you talk about apps, if I'm hearing new developments in Salesforce, is another going to be big vendor city, or are we going to see smaller players make more prominent impact this year? Neil, why don't you go?
I think both. I mean, not only Salesforce. We got some news a couple weeks ago that SAP was moving into healthcare and was doing the same thing, basically the same thing as Salesforce. Taking a CRM platform and adapting it to healthcare.
Neil, Stephanie, what about you? I mean, you cover the early stage quite a bit, and you also
startups too.
Yeah, and Stephanie, you cover a lot of those early stage startups. There's a startup pitch, but I mean, even going out of the pitch areas and into the more prominent, high impact areas. I mean, do you see it? Just not the IBMs of the world or the Athena Healths or the others, and maybe are we going to see unknowns or smaller players play a bigger role at HIMSS?
I think you will definitely see smaller players playing a bigger role at HIMSS, but you'll also be and Neil can speak to this, whether this is just something he sees usually, but I think you'll be having these big companies like Salesforce showing their relationship with much smaller companies and the role that they can play. And I know in the past, companies like Qualcomm have done that, and showing how their network is used by this wide ecosystem of early stage and growth stage companies. But and Walgreens has done that to a certain extent, although I suppose they wouldn't be a typical HIMSS exhibitor. But
go ahead, Stephanie.
Yeah, so I think you will definitely have much more of companies showing how they can be innovative by working with these startup companies, and what's more, they'll want to be demonstrating that by having these sort of mini ecosystems all around the exhibition floor.
Well, and it's so funny, Neil, you mentioned SAP rolling out some kind of Salesforce-style cloud application. I mean, it tells you how much often at HIMSS old is new again, right? I mean, SAP was rolling out, some kind of clinical care application that kind of mirrored what Salesforce was trying to do, I think, 5 years ago at a HIMSS. And some of the biggest common players at this event, even the vendors like a Highland Software, they closed a huge deal with Mayo Clinic this year. So many of the standbys are still trying to innovate in some of these same areas. I mean, so it does sound like the big players are still swinging at some of the big problems. I want to switch a little bit. I want to ask this, Neil. Last year I think it was refreshing that one of the things that probably, if we look back at HIMSS, that surprised us was that kind of through Farsad Mostashari and through our friend at the Walking Gallery, Regina Holiday. I mean, it really started.
There's also a story from just a week ago up on our website.
Yeah, exactly. But so that uprising about rights to patient records and how many patients should have input really got kick-started at HIMSS. Is there a company, or is there an issue, Neil, that you really think you would love to see raised at HIMSS that maybe is not on everybody's radar, or maybe people at HIMSS would rather not discuss?
Okay, well, the reason why that happened then is because the Friday before it started, CMS proposed changing the Stage 2 meaningful use rules to reduce the patient engagement requirement from 5% of patients to one single patient. And that got the patient engagement community up in arms, to the point where our friend Casey Quinlan had her "I Got Your One Patient Right Here" jacket done by Regina Holiday, and the one patient was the middle finger.
So what about this year?
This year, nothing. There haven't been any bombshells this week yet, of course.
So what would you like to see? Like, what's something that you would love to see brought up?
I would like to see, and I know it will be brought up, the lack of interoperability. And who's going to do something real about it?
Who is going to do something real about it?
I thought that APIs were solving that problem.
Well, they haven't yet. Everybody is talking about the Fire specification and the Smart on Fire app that they developed at Harvard Med School. The thing is, that app has just recently become finalized, and that technical specification has just become finalized in the last few months, so they're just starting to get ramped up with that. Even though they've been talking about it for a couple of years now, it's an HL7 standard that was still in essentially beta until just a few months ago. But even so, is it still even so? What's it going to do? Is it really changing how the big vendors operate? I don't know.
I'm glad you mentioned interoperability, because last year you did feel some kind of at least downward pressure on vendors to do something in interoperability, and Epic went like that, right, and so on and so forth. I don't feel that pressure is there.
No, I don't feel like it is either. I know that Congress and ONC have been talking about information blocking for the better part of a year. But the information blocking, the blame for information blocking initially was squarely on the shoulders of the vendors, with a gay.
Oh.
However, it's become obvious that a lot of the blame falls on the large health systems that don't want to share data with competition, and then they are in turn blaming fee-for-service, which is affecting that competitive environment. Now, the faster we get away from fee-for-service, the faster we'll get to interoperability, they say. I'll believe it when I see it.
Well, Stephanie, let me flip to you. We just talked a lot to Neil a lot about, what would he would like to see emerge and the talk about interoperability. Is there an issue that you would love to see take center stage at HIMSS that maybe isn't on the establishment radar?
Sure. Well, actually, I mean, this kind of goes along with something that came out yesterday. The Precision Medicine Initiative is all of one aspect of it is how can, and one longstanding debate with patients is how to get patients to share their data in a way that kind of takes their rights into consideration, their sense of their interest in privacy, but if they want to make their data available for clinical research, how is that done? How can we do that? And the fact sheet the White House came out with yesterday, it's like a who's who of the electronic health record vendors, health systems, providing ways for patients to collaborating with each other to provide a way for patients to share data from their electronic health records, giving them access to their electronic health record. At least that's what Yale New Haven Health is doing. But we did a summary of it on Morning Read this morning. Sorry.
Something.
Yeah, go ahead, Neil.
Yeah, CMS sort of quietly said yesterday, and I'm going to work on a story this afternoon, quietly said yesterday that
Spoiler alert.
It's time for hospitals to stop charging fees for patients to get copies of their records.
That's interesting. That's really interesting. And I think
Not mandating it, but sort of using the bully pulpit.
Well, I'm glad you brought up precision medicine. I think, Stephanie, actually, before we came on, you mentioned this. I mean, if you were to look at the White House press release, I mean, you could have ripped White House off it and put HIMSS preview on it. I mean, it looks so replete with IT vendors. I mean, there's a real chance, that we have seen our surprise HIMSS preview here in the last couple days with the emergence of the precision medicine announcements. I mean, you talk about something that dovetails with population health. I mean, they're often seen at the opposite ends, but I think that you talk about one, you talk about the other, and the data that's going to be gathered and used. So, I mean, do you think that the precision health announcements that have happened here are going to be thick next week? I mean, we're going to see more of it because of HIMSS?
You're asking me or Neil?
Yes.
I think it'll definitely be part of the conversation, and people will raise it, and people will want to talk about it because it puts them in the desirable light of putting patients' needs first. And even if that doesn't always happen or doesn't ever happen in practice by various companies, they want to be seen as talking in those terms, talking in favor of the patient, and this fits in with that talking point.
Neil, what about you? Yes, I agree that there will be announcements. I got a lot of press releases saying so and so company is supporting or attending or in favor of the Precision Medicine Initiative. In the last couple of days, did a story about one small startup that was attending also, but I imagine there will be some product announcements. I don't have any inside information on this. There will be some product announcements on how to support precision medicine, because it's really all about data. And let's think about how valuable the data has become. Look who's running CMS, Andy Slavitt, the co-founder of Optum.
Yeah.
It's a big deal, and some people are concerned that somebody like that is in there. Now, on the flip side, the president said that he said in no uncertain terms yesterday that information should belong to patients, and that got even Eric Topol to tweet about it, to say that they're really, this is wonderful. Hugo Campos, a patient advocate himself who just had surgery to have a pacemaker replaced, is still fighting for the data from the pacemaker that's implanted in his chest. He was one of the invitees. He was at the White House yesterday. He seemed to love what was being said. Now, what politicians say and what happens in the real world obviously can be two different things. So again, let's wait and see if it really happens the way they're talking about, because I'm not convinced until I see results.
Yeah, and it lets a lot of show and no go. I have to wonder. I mean, most of the vendors at this event, I have to say, I mean, patients are the afterthought, right? They're trying to fill needs that the hospital community has. Most of them aren't about disseminating data or being transparent. It's about, more efficient delivery of data to home healthcare devices or extraction of that, or it's about, I mean, I guess the one thing that I think we talked about cybersecurity at the beginning, and so let me chime in. I think the one thing that I think I would read into it if cybersecurity kind of had a quiet HIMSS is it means no one has good answers. I think that's what that's going to mean, because if there were good cybersecurity solutions, it would trump or at least get on the same page as precision medicine. It would definitely trump pop health. I mean, it is, even with Apple's debate with the government looming, the issue of security and data security is gigantic. And if we don't hear major announcements that are impressive, I think it means the industry still has no real good answers. At least that's my point of view.
I agree. Yeah, absolutely. And I haven't seen any previews telling me that that's going to happen. I just know that
Well, it's not exactly a preview, and it's not exactly like a HIMSS-centered news development. But I guess in the last couple of months, some payers have come out to say, that they've inked this agreement with a particular cybersecurity firm, because it at least sends a message that that they're trying to address what they know is a big issue, particularly the payers that have been hit by data breaches, external data breaches.
Interesting. I will say this.
To me,
go ahead.
To me, Hollywood Presbyterian's response was completely inadequate.
Yeah. So
I wrote about
to wrap up, HIMSS, obviously HIMSS has all. I think we've touched on some of the big things. So we're going to see more population health, more precision medicine. We're hopeful on cybersecurity and more on patient transparency and information. Although I think we're dubious on those last two. HIMSS is always great because they get some pretty baller keynotes, right? I think last year it was Hillary Clinton last year. Who was last year?
It was George W. Bush last year.
G.W. Bush. So now they've downgraded to Peyton Manning. I have to say this: would you, if you're HIMSS,
well, actually they've upgraded to Michael Dell.
Or these are all issues, right? There's definitely some shades of gray there. If you were HIMSS, would you have yanked Peyton Manning from the keynote list because of all the sexual harassment stuff that's come out?
Good question.
And I throw a curve every now and then. Stephanie, you follow football. Would you?
Oh yeah, I'm all over football.
I don't think I would.
I wouldn't have an NFL player talking, for one thing. I know that they're a crowd pleaser. I would have someone from totally outside of healthcare talking, and not someone that's gonna paint some technology company that's gonna oversimplify everything to do with healthcare, but someone that has a respect and humbleness and interest in healthcare. That's like a big technology company. I would have someone from Google or a company, another company, talking about how they're looking at the future.
No, we got a rock star.
Well, what I'm going to say, this is typical actually with him. So usually on the now Peyton Manning isn't speaking until Friday afternoon. All the vendors are done Thursday. They're going home. They're out of there, or they're going to be partying like rock stars in Vegas Thursday night and hungover. The last keynote on the last day is always somebody not directly connected to healthcare. Usually somebody famous. The best one that I remember from recent years is Scott Adams of Dilbert fame. Certainly could talk to the tech audience, but do it in obviously a very funny way. There was also Michael J. Fox a few years ago, who obviously has the connection to healthcare through Parkinson's and his foundation, but he barely said a word about health IT. He basically just told stories about his life, about his jokes, and it was just inspiring to see a guy with Parkinson's up there commanding a stage like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I don't think I would have. I don't think we could. I don't think they probably would pull Peyton Manning, or if you could pull Peyton Manning. I do like the rock star approach. I mean, Peyton Manning's had lots of surgeries, right? So maybe he'll talk about that patient experience.
I think he will. The difficulty in getting data, particularly as he moved from Indianapolis to Denver. Did he switch doctors? Were the records transferred? That sort of thing. I'd love to hear that.
Peyton Manning, how badly do your Papa John's franchises impact health? That's what I want to ask. No, but maybe we get I'm surprised it isn't a politician, right? It's a political year. So why isn't Donald Trump coming out to him?
Right.
Maybe he'll send Chris Christie.
Yeah, maybe he'll.
a former politician or a former presidential candidate would have been a good one. They had Newt Gingrich.
Jimmy Carter.
Jimmy, Mr. Peanut, yeah. Well, okay. Well, let's wrap up him. So we're going to do a we can never get enough HIMSS here at MedCity News, and so what's going to happen? Well, at the end of HIMSS next Friday, we're going to talk about what really happened. We're going to contrast the things that we thought were going to happen with what actually went down, and see what kind of impact that's going to have for the rest of the year.
And I will be live from Vegas.
Live from Vegas. Look, don't get married while in Vegas. That's all I'm saying. Both of you.
It will be 10 in the morning out there when we start MedHeads. So, so take that.
We'll take that with a grain of salt. So let's wrap it up as we always do with the most important stories of the week that we thought in this week of healthcare. Stephanie, why don't we go with you?
Sure. Well, this week, Propeller Health, they have an FDA-approved sensor to track inhaler use for people with asthma and COPD. They announced a new collaboration with a pharmaceutical company to develop connected sensors, and it's inhaler, connected inhalers, and it's an inhaler that is the most common inhaler of all of them. It's a collaboration with Aptar Pharma, and it's interesting because Propeller Health has already collaborated with GSK and Boehringer Ingelheim. So this is actually a much more expansive collaboration because Aptar Pharma actually develops drug delivery technology. So this should be really interesting, and with the idea of making it easier with people with a chronic condition like asthma to track their use, and for physicians to share that information with physicians who can intervene if they see that people aren't using their inhalers, or maybe having a problem getting their medication, or the medication's having a bad reaction.
Neil, what about you?
Yeah, the most interesting story to me was the announcement that eClinicalWorks, a big vendor of ambulatory.
Oh boy, problems by the lake today, Stephanie. Neil, it's okay. We feel you, brother.
They announced
he doesn't know.
They're going to be an acute care EHR.
To me, good.
Yeah, they're right now looking at the small end of the market. I don't think they want to take on Epic and Cerner head to head yet, but it sounds like they are, going after trying to compete more with say Athena Health, Allscripts, some of the players that tend to serve the smaller to mid-size hospitals.
So for me, this is going to be a shameless plug. Forgive me for doing so. The biggest announcement this week to me was our MedCity News' Town Mall, MAUL, which we're going to be hosting in concert with our friends at Above the Law. We're going to have a conversation about healthcare reform and what it means in D.C. on March 10th. Jeff McCauca from AARP fame will be joining Legal Minds, my counterpart at Above the Law, Mr. Elie Mistal, and I will moderate a very audience heavy, audience participation heavy conversation, and trying to get to the nitty gritty of the candidates, the presidential candidates' policies, what they mean, and what should be done. It's going to be a lot of fun. It's super cheap. It's going to be a great little bar in D.C. March 10th. You can find information about it on the site, and it's going to be kind of one of those laid-back, loosey-goosey, MedHeads-esque kind of conversations live. So look for the site for more information on that. You know, I want to thank everybody for coming on. I want to wish Stephanie Baum in Philadelphia and Neil Versel in Chicago luck as they go to Vegas for one of the largest HIMSS ever at 50,000 people. For Neil and Stephanie, I'm Chris Seper. I hope you have a great weekend, and if you're going to HIMSS, I hope your flight does not get canceled. See you.